One of the first true all-British rock and roll classics, this song was first released by the Beatles as the opening number on their very first album in 1963. Interestingly, John Lennon was later to admit that he stole the bass line for this number from Chuck Berry, from a song called Talking About You. Now really this just underlines a point that you'll often hear me make about the modular nature of rock and roll. How you can steal an idea from one tune and recycle it in another. If stealing was good enough for John Lennon, well, it's good enough for you or me. Okay, this course is all about creating riffs and licks that work specifically over individual chords. The chord-specific approach to improvising as opposed to the more simplistic key-specific approach. So when we're working using this approach, the first thing we have to do is become familiar with the chords of the song. And I think the best way of doing that is to simply learn the rhythm guitar part. Now this song was originally written in E, but we're going to play it in the key of C. So let's just map out the chord sequence using basic bar chords. So we start off with C using the E shape at the 8th fret, 2 bars of C, 1 bar of F, same fret but using the A shape, straight back to C, 2 bars of C, down to G at the 3rd fret using the E shape still, to G 7th, then we come back to C for 1 bar, C 7th, F, F minor, change that shape from the A minor shape to the, beg your pardon, from the A major shape to the A minor, and back to C, G 7th, back to C. Then the very last bar on the part that we're going to solo over is a C 7th. I'm going to show you why that is in a minute. When I play this in a band, as a rhythm guitarist, I'll probably play shuffle patterns over the first couple of lines of the song and the last line, something like this. She was just 17, no, why? Part of the song. Here's a reminder of the chord sequence. So if you want to pause the video and take a bit of time to commit this to memory, you'll find that that will make the rest of the lesson a lot easier to follow. To put the solo we're going to play in its proper context, it's useful to understand how the main part of the song links to the middle section. Notice the bracket at the end of the verse, showing you what to play for the last bar on the first run through. Well, you then hit the repeat marks and come back to the beginning for the second verse. So we run through the whole thing again, and the second time when we get to that bracket, instead of the C major we play a C 7th, and this signals that a change is coming. This will make more sense to listen to. Let's just demonstrate that on the guitar. So at the end of the first verse we've got the line, saw her standing there. It stays on C, goes back to the beginning. Well, she looked at me and I could see it, so on through that verse. Then when it gets to the end of that verse we've got saw her standing there, C 7th. Well, my heart went boom. And that's the link to the middle section. So that C 7th there heralds the F seventh chord. Saw her standing there. Well, my heart went boom. You can hear the effect of that. Now that'll be crucial later when we're looking at the solo to explain the very last line of the solo. Here's a quick look at the middle section. Although we're not soloing over this part, it's an interesting part of the song. It's actually 10 bars long instead of the traditional 8. And it sounds like this. My heart went boom as we crossed the room, and I held her hand in mine. Well, we danced, and we're back into the last verse. So nice build up back into the last verse there. Okay. Now to that solo. Here's the end result played against the full speed backing track. 1, 2, 3, 4. One riff at a time. Starting with the C chord, I am playing the root and fifth together as a double stop, a brief visit to the sixth and fourth together as a double stop. Then with my first finger here I'm holding down the root and the flatted third, and then the flatted third is corrected to the major third by hammer on with that finger. Important thing here is that that finger doesn't interfere with the second string, because you want that to ring while only that note changes. So in slow motion we got so this is just about as cliched as a rock and roll riff can get. Straight out of Chuck Berry's box of favourites, that one. So we repeat that for the second bar. So we've got twice through. Then over the F chord, we're thinking about A-shaped F, and we just take these two notes, the root and third, and just play it like that, nice and straightforward as a double stop. And then for the fourth bar, we're back to the chord of C. We use the same idea as before, but with a slightly different rhythmic feel. So again we're using our root and fifth, straight to the sixth and fourth, the third, fifth and minor third corrected to major, and then back to our root note. So the whole of that first line again. And you'll notice at the end of that first line there's a little pickup which is going to take us into our next bar. So that's the first line. Do try and understand each lick as you play it. It's very tempting, I know, just to learn things parrot fashion. But if you invest the necessary mental effort into understanding each lick, I think you'll find you'll get a great deal more out of these lessons, and you'll thank me for that advice later on. Okay, let's move on to the next couple of bars, which are over the chord C. And once again, we sort of take our basic idea that we've been working with in the previous C bars. But this time, we kind of reverse it. So we're starting on the flat third, correcting it to the major third with a hammer on, and then up to the double stop with the root and fifth. Then for the G chord, we come down here to the third fret, thinking again of the E shape, and out of this we just take the fifth and the third and pair those together, sliding into them. So that's just sliding from fret 2 to 3 there with that finger, at the same time fret 3 to 4 with that finger. All the time playing it as a double stop. Then we use a really neat trick to convert G major to G7th. And really, physically, that's very simple. We just slide that shape up 3 frets. But let's just explore why that works. Really, we're moving from this part of the cage system, the E shape, to the D shape. So in the D shape, we would have that as our major chord, so that's a G major, because remember our root note is always G here. So that's G major, so that D7th shape would give us a G7th. So out of that, we're using the flat 7th note and the 5th note. And that's enough to imply the 7th chord. So far we've got Now this is a very good point at which to pause and consolidate thus far, because the next part is a little trickier to learn. Okay, the next part of the song, of a solo, we're going to use an idea based half on country scale and half on arpeggio ideas. So starting with the C, we play the root notes, and then we sort of slide up this country scale run. But we do it with a rhythmic accent on that note. So really we're emphasising the sort of major 6th arpeggio notes. 1, 3, 5, 6, 8. For C7th, but instead of going up to the root, we go to the flat 7 there. So that's, sorry, beg your pardon, C. Then we hit the F root note, playing the same country scale run, but you have to look out for the second string throwing that note up a step there. Not. Which I think you can hear is pretty horrible. Okay, then just as the audience is beginning to think it can predict what you're going to do next, you change what we're doing in two different ways. We're going to go to F minor, and over the F minor, first thing we're going to do is miss the first beat altogether, and then coming in on the back of the beat, we're going to play a little bit of blues scale. So altogether that's missed beat there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Coming in after the 1 there. Now, in my experience, this part of the solo usually takes quite a bit of work for people to get up to speed. So to help you with that, I'm going to show you a very specific way of approaching it that will get you through this stage nice and quickly. So the trick is, first of all, just to concentrate on playing each root note at the beginning of each bar against a metronome set at 100 beats per minute to start with. So get the metronome going, and I'm just going to play 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, F, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Notice there on the F the second time I hit it half a step after the beat. That's just to get us used to the timing. So I'll go through that again. 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, F, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now what you then do is just flick the metronome up about 20 steps. Let's take it up to 120 beats per minute. Do the same thing again. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, F, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Once you're used to that, crank it up another 20 steps and so on. Now I'd say that once you're up to 160, that'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, F, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Once you can do it at that speed, move on to the next step. Now the next step is to set the metronome back down to 100 beats per minute and go over each individual riff as many times as you need to get the exact timing of the riff right. So here's the first C riff. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once I'm happy with that, I do the same with the C7th riff. 2, 3, 4. Just over as many times as it takes to get the timing right. Then on to the F. 2, 3, 4. And then the F minor riff, remembering to come in after the beats. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2, 3, 4, 1. 3, 4, 1. Then, again, crank the metronome up 20 points. Go through that routine again, each riff until you really got the timing nice and smooth. So then each time we put the metronome up another 20, check ourselves out at each level until we get up to 160. It'll be sounding like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. C7th. 1, 2, 3, 4. minor on the back of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 4, 1. 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. So you notice there, each time I satisfied myself that I was playing it more or less right 3 times through before I moved on to the next arpeggio. So now you're ready to put the whole section together, but first take the metronome back down to the slower speed of 100 beats per minute, and then play 1 bar of C, 1 bar of C7, 1 of F, 1 of F minor, all after each other, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over and over. In a loop. C. C7. F. F minor. C. C7. F. And so on, round and round, until you're happy and free and smooth at that particular speed. Then we crank it up to the 120, then the 140, and finally the 160, by which time it'll sound hopefully something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you're really trying to make sure that you can play it 3 times through correctly at each of those speeds. Okay, well that was fun, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed working through that. So now it's on to the last line, where once again we're coming back to a C chord, but this time we're going to use the A shape. So we're down here at the 3rd fret. I don't know if you remember this idea from the earlier lesson. We're thinking inside the A shape, and we're going to use the 5th note here together with the 3rd note here, but we're going to take the 3rd back to the minor 3rd and correct it by sliding it. So again, it's a double stop. We play both these strings together. I think on the tab I've just written that as a... That's it. So there's 2 slides involved. So that's the C. Then pop these 2 fingers across there, thinking of that G shape, but slide them straight up to the D7th shape, G7th, that we used earlier. So that's... Sorry. I should say at this point, it's quite important to practice the link from the last section. Because that's quite a jump there to get into that position. So do one of these F minor riffs, followed by one of those slidey C riffs there. And that will get you used to the transition. Then finally, we come back to where we started in the C shape, and we play a sort of C minor 7th arpeggio rake. Now rake is where you put your finger across all 4 strings there, but these are all sounded as a muted string. So you're literally just touching the strings, not pressing them down. So slow motion, the effect is click, 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 ding. Click, 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 ding. So the first 3 notes are used just percussively, and then you sound the top string. That's called a rake. That leads into a little bit of C blues scale. Descending. Straight out of the first position blues scale. Now for the final bar, remember what I said earlier about appreciating the context that the solo is used in the song. The solo is going to lead not back to the beginning of the verse but on to the middle 8. So this is where, when we showed you the rhythm part, we went from the C, C7th, and then to the middle 8, which starts with F7th. So to sort of underline this in the song, in a solo, we're going to use a riff that takes C up to C7th in very much the same way as we earlier did with the G. So this time with the C major, taking the 5th and the 3rd, we're going to target C7th from the D7th shape. And we're going to fill in the gaps in between chromatically. So that's going through the last 4 bars: C, G7, rake on the C minor, blues scale, C major, up to C7. Its own, that final lick doesn't necessarily sound right. It sounds a bit strange, but I promise you when you do this in context it works a treat as a way of linking back quite dramatically to the middle section of the song. So that concludes our working through each individual part of the solo. You may want to rerun parts of the video just to sort of iron out any of the trickier bits for yourself before moving on to the final part of the lesson. Okay, so now we're going to play the whole solo through against the backing track. I've recorded 2 different backing tracks to help you with this, and they're both available to download from the toolbox to the right of the screen. Now, the first backing track you'll see is called Slow, and this is actually recorded at 80 beats per minute, which is half the speed we're aiming to eventually achieve. So let's try playing now over that backing track, playing the whole solo together after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so once you're comfortable playing it along with me at that speed, you'll almost certainly have learnt the solo pretty well. Now that's a good time to go off and practice it without the backing track, just against the metronome, and start the metronome at around about the 80 beats per minute and gradually crank it up as you gain confidence. Now once you're getting it up to around about the 160 beats per minute speed, then that's a good time to come back and join me in this next run through against the fast backing track. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cracked playing through that at full speed, then very well done, because you're well on your way to being a pro level rock and roll guitar player. If you've been following this lesson through as part of the rock and roll guitar course, you'll be getting a good grasp by now of how all these ideas map onto the underlying chords. Now this understanding gives you a great advantage, a great shortcut when you're working out any classic rock and roll solo. It'll also help when you're wanting to improvise original solos over any rock and roll tune. Now in the next lesson I'm going to show you around one of my favourite solos by the great Eddie Cochran. So I look forward to you joining me for that. Okay, see you then.